Yeah, I mean, sometimes, sometimes, I would say most of the time, a lot of the times, depending on where you work, you gotta bite your tongue a lot.
Yeah.
And that can be hard for some people, but, it grows on you. And
Because people are fucking assholes all the time.
Assholes.
Yeah. No,
So
I know.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
We ready?
We're ready.
Let's do this. Perfect. We're excited today. We have a guest with us, and I'm going to make sure I didn't ask you because I like to know if I got the name right. Sami Sattva?
Yep.
Is that correct? And Sami is, what are you, the president, owner of Lambda Lion?
I am a managing partner.
Managing partner.
Creative director.
Okay. And she is here to kind of talk to us about what she does, where she came from, the little bit of background we know. I don't personally know Sami. I'm meeting you for the first time. We've had very little conversation. You filled out a couple of questions that we like to ask before we do these. Other than that, we're just going to sit down and have a conversation. Billy knows her because you did some work for her, I think, correct?
Yeah, I worked with her on a project last year when we did the 48-hour film project. And that was a lot of fun. It was a whole weekend full of filming.
It was a very sleepy weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a 48-hour get it done now type of program.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
How do you do when you do that? How do you do physically when you do that?
You have to manage when to eat, when to sleep, when to stop, when to take a break. And if you don't, you'll crash real quick.
I think there's a perspective I have, at least on I have a friend of mine that is a producer of movies in LA, and she talks about, if I have an opportunity to talk to her, I have to catch her in that 3 to 4 hour window where she's home just barely sleeping before she has to turn right back around and drive. But then she has long periods, by long periods might be a week or two in between work. But then when it starts right back up again, she's impossible to get a hold of. So I'm assuming that's how all of that stuff gets done, because then I heard your story, even for what you guys were filming, and I know another buddy of mine that does commercials, and he's like, oh, yeah, it's just insane. Mm-hmm. Is that the nature of the beast?
Yeah, I mean, we don't do too many projects like that are like quick turnaround. You only have 48 hours to do that. But I would imagine like film and TV are very much like that. But it's a beast.
Yeah.
And you gotta have the right crew. You gotta eat properly. You have to make sure all of those things are lined up.
Right.
It's
critical.
It's a pretty hefty job, but it's fun, and it's like the adrenaline kind of gets pumping, and it's at the end of it, something like the 48-hour film project, you end up seeing this, your film on the big screen.
Yeah. And all the different cuts come together. I think I remember, wasn't there a picture of you guys like in an apartment up in Northwest or something where you were going through the video?
Oh, I think I posted that.
Maybe. Yeah, like a behind the scenes kind of shot.
Yeah, towards the end of the day, though, or the second day, and you all looked pretty wiped out.
Yeah.
And I think you were watching the edits or were editing it, or I forget what the picture said. All right, Sami, well, tell us. Let's start at the beginning and just kind of, to everybody listening, tell us about who you are and where you come from and how you ended up here.
All right.
Yeah, do we have time?
Do we have time?
About an hour, so.
Long story. Well, I'm originally from Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona, and kind of made my way all throughout over the Southwest, in Las Vegas and Southern California. I started early. I started working really early. It was 14. I mean, I think that's pretty young.
Yeah.
Started in hospitality and really loved connecting with people and hosting and everything that comes with.
What type of hospitality?
So I started in restaurants.
Like a hostess or a waitress or something like that?
I was 14. I think I was barely in high school.
Yeah.
I had barely entered. I think it might have been the summer going into high school. And it was a host. It was a host position, and I really enjoyed it. And, you were like that front line, and you welcomed people, and you had to be that warm and welcoming face to anyone dining in and wanting to have an enjoyable experience out of their home. And so that just kind of snowballed, and it went into, I found events and experiential marketing, and then found my creative outlet where I started in front of the lens. I was a model. I think I was maybe 17, 18. And about a year of doing that, I quickly realized that I wanted to be behind the scenes.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed directing. And then so I kind of switched roles. And then from there, it just became, I don't know, I wanted to start my own thing. I started bartending, went further into the restaurant and bar life. But I wasn't in it for the party. I was really in it to serve the people.
Yeah. So going back to Phoenix, you're how old before you first moved? You're born in Phoenix? And how old when you first moved to somewhere else?
I was, I think maybe 20, almost 21.
Oh, okay. So all of this that you did from 0 to 20 was all in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then finally after that, you moved where at 20 years old?
I moved to Las Vegas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, straight to Las Vegas. I had visited once and...
Just on a whim, just picked up and said, fuck it, I'm going to go.
Well, essentially, yeah.
Cool.
So I had visited once, met some cool people through one person I knew, and was kind of starstruck by the entire entertainment industry, and being, hospitality is part of also industry or entertainment, excuse me.
Sure.
And so it all kind of came together of serving and providing and curating experiences for people and being a part of that life. So I didn't know anybody, like one person, but relatively like nobody in Vegas that really could do anything for me and advance me. So I moved on a whim. And
where'd you live? Where'd you stay?
I ended up staying with, this is kind of an embarrassing story. So during that visit, when I was in Las Vegas, I had met this dancer. And by dancer, I mean she was a performer. She was, much like a go-go dancer. And I was like mesmerized by her because I was also a dancer. And I was like, I just tapped her foot and I was like, come talk to me. I need to know more of you.
While she's performing. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know who does that. So I wanted to know everything about her and we just connected. I'm a very intuitive person. So I felt drawn to her for some reason. And I just listened to that intuition and we hit it off. And she was like, you should just come live here. I have a house with 4 extra bedrooms.
So
and
she doesn't give you a kick when you tap her on the foot when she's on stage or anything.
Oh, no.
You're just, you yell up to her, I'd love to talk to you for a minute. And after the show's done.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
she stopped. She welcomed
Good
it.
for you.
Yeah. She was open arms and I don't know, maybe she is also an intuitive person. So maybe she felt it.
You know how, well, I think that is very rare. Not very many people act on what they're thinking. They think it. Oh, I'd really like to go tap her on the foot and find out what she does for a living, or really love to go ask that person who is doing what I would like to do, how they did it.
Pick
but
their brain.
Very few people, though, have it to walk up to somebody and do that, particularly if they're on stage. So good for you. Yeah. What an advantage that was at 20 years old to then have it pay off.
Yeah. And I was there illegally because I obviously was 20.
Right.
And I had sorry, sister, I had your ID. It's okay. I think she knows. I mean, she knew. But anyway, we hit it off and we stayed in contact. I went home and kind of did my thing. And I was just like, I need to move there. I was drawn. I was compelled. I was just swooned all over the place. And so I did. And then I moved in to her house that had several extra rooms. And then we just started a business together. We just randomly, because we kind of combined dance and production and all this creative stuff, but also, gathering a troupe together. And we started that together. So that was my first business.
And the business sold what?
Entertainment services really is mostly dance production for concerts, lounges, promotional models, all the things that are in the entertainment industry in Las Vegas that you see girls that are like, eye candy and dancers and all that jazz.
Right. And she had some insight into the industry. Any business sense between the two of you?
Yeah, definitely. So she was actually, she had a real estate business.
Oh, wow.
Really interesting contrast.
Yeah.
Night and day, really. Realtor by day.
Yeah, she's
entertainer by night.
Vertically integrated. Yeah.
Yeah. And she had already kind of was like, she's from Las Vegas.
Born and raised. Still there.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm 33. I think she's 34. And that was 14 years ago or something like that. And so we did our thing. And then I was there for about 4 years.
So she's 20 years old and or 21 years old and is a go-go dancer at night and has a real estate business during the day at 21.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at that age, she even had a Corvette as well. I mean, she was banking and
wow.
She just did well.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And so now you're into business together.
We're no longer in business together.
I'm sorry, going back to 22, 3, however old it was. How long did that last?
About 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, for basically the duration that I was in Las Vegas. And then I ended up like kind of, so to speak, lose my mind because there's not really much to do in Nevada, like Southern Nevada, outside of Las Vegas. And I'm very much like into outdoors and I like going out and adventuring and going to lakes and traveling and like exploring. And I wasn't getting all of that. Plus the people there were very zombie natured, as you can imagine. At least the people that I, knew.
Right.
And it kind of just like drove me nuts. I felt alone. So I went on my family.
I go to, I've been to Vegas 30 times. And the thing I notice about Vegas, and I love Vegas for a few days.
Right.
And the thing I notice about Vegas is, at least from the outside to somebody coming in, there seems to be a lack of community because nobody's from Vegas, right? So everybody comes from outside Vegas and again, I don't live there, so I don't know that, but there certainly seems to be this perceived lack of that community on my side. So having you say that, I've said that before about Vegas.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very lonely feeling, especially when you come from, outside of Vegas. So I ended up leaving.
But still 20 years old and you up and move from Phoenix to Vegas on your own.
Yeah, it was weird. I look back and I'm like, what?
What the hell were you thinking?
Yeah,
right.
but I was liberated and I was empowered and I felt so designated to do that. I didn't have any question. I at the time I was with a partner at the time and I was like, I'm going. If you don't want to go with me, bye.
Right. Did you have parents that were pushing you or was there anybody in your circle that was saying, get out and go? No. Just you were.
I had support. That my mother is like my best friend and she was like, well, if that's what you want to do, then do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I mean, figure your shit out and make sure you have your ducks in a row. And I mean, at that point, and still to this day, how perfect can something be before you actually jump into it is kind of like it's a conundrum. Like it's never going to be that perfect. And the moment you keep waiting for it to be perfect and you're just going to keep lighting it and pushing back the date. And so you kind of just have to like almost perfect. Great. Let's do it.
We talk about that all the time here. And it is whenever I consult with people who are thinking about starting a business or getting a new job or making a jump because they don't like where they are, those changes, you can wait until, and then you turn around and you're 50 years old and you never did it. I know we were just talking on a podcast a couple of weeks ago about this. I know people who are in their 50s who have big plans. I've known them since they were 6 years old and they still have big plans, but they still continue to go do the same job that they've done forever. That's not an indictment when I say that. I'm just saying that if you talk about it all of the time, that uncomfortableness that it takes and the risk that it takes to go do it, it's never perfect. The perfect time to do it is right now. Well, I don't have enough money. There's people online that teach, have 6 months in the bank and have all of your bills paid and don't have any debt and all this. And all that is just things that stop you from going and doing what you would like to attempt. There's no guarantee, but you don't go out and try.
Right.
You never will. And pretty soon you're 50.
Right. I think I actually even went to Vegas with like $500.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just like knew. I credit so much to my intuition. And back then I really didn't even know what I was listening to. Whereas now I do. But you just got to jump and kind of when you land, figure the rest out.
Right.
Figure your land out once you get on the ground.
Well, I think we underestimate ourselves to a huge degree. I think I tell people that if you could look through my eyes and what I've been through, you'd understand what's possible. And I always see so much more in people than what people see in themselves, simply because I've seen the worst of. What'd you do?
I didn't do anything.
You did something.
Yeah. Oh, my bad. Fucked it up.
It's. I have hit the phone number of the electrician on our. Yes, because inexplicably.
Oh no, I ruined everything. Why don't you put one of those lights over there? Why don't you put one of those lights over here? Oh. That's true.
See, Billy knows.
Billy
on
knows
it.
a lot.
Yeah, I could hear the sarcasm in your voice because it be in the
I ask
shot.
him questions all the time, but he doesn't make me feel little or anything. That's
Yeah,
great.
good.
Yeah. Only when Ben is my business partner, also life partner. There you go. When he's not available, I ask.
You ask Billy.
Billy, of course. Yeah.
Billy is wise beyond his years.
Yeah.
I try to act like it at least.
Right. The thing I love about Billy is this thing we do here has gone so well because I'm almost exactly double his age, and neither one of us think we know everything. We just know what we know, and so what Billy's good at and what he knows, he runs with, and what I'm good at and I know, I run with. And between the two of us, I think we're constantly teaching each other, or at least looking at things differently.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what the hell do I know about being a 26-year-old in today's world? Right? You can,
I know, right?
You can kind of have an idea of what you think it's like, right? But his world at 26 and even yours at 33, I think you said, is so different than mine at the same age. Because I'm 50 now, and so it's fun to be open-minded about what it's like to be 26 as opposed to, when I was a kid, 50 was really old.
Right.
Right. And my parents were old at 50, and now I'm more active than anybody I know that's half my age. So
I actually have recently had that thought of like, when I was young, I thought 30 was fucking old, and now I'm at 33 and I'm like, oh no.
This ain't shit.
Oh no, I still have so much.
Well, that will continue for you. And again, like I said, I just turned 50 and I thought, fuck, 50. But the reality is I feel 25. I think it's all how you feel. I know you're an outdoors person, and exercise is a big deal for me, and just being active, and I work a ton. But I have friends who are 53 years old who retired, and I thought, well, what in the fuck are you going to do now? You're retired, and you're on the golf course at 8:00 in the morning. That's great. And then lunch is every day at 1:00, and that's fine. And then the fucking street lights come on and you go to bed, and that's fine. And then the next morning I shoot myself in the face because I can't imagine doing the same thing like that day in and day out, year in and year out. I
don't think that would ever stop for me either.
No, and I think it keeps some of us young. And then there's some of us that complain incessantly about how old they are, right? And
and how shitty they feel.
Well,
change it.
Yeah,
do something about it.
That's exactly right. I don't remember the point I was making, but I've had another thought about what you were talking about, and that is you put yourself out there and made yourself available to take advantage of opportunities, which is critical. It's not always exactly what you know, or you're not going to get exactly what you're trying to get, but you're out there trying to take advantage of those opportunities as they presented themselves. Yeah. Obviously, that's what you did.
Yeah. And I didn't even, it wasn't a conscious thing. I mean, I'm sure it was conscious in the moment, but it wasn't one of those thoughts where I was like, I need to seize the moment and, take advantage of that and just go. I don't know. It was a really weird, when I look back at it, I'm not really sure how that all happened.
Well, I think it happens spontaneously and naturally because I had no one telling me, and I was so whatever opportunity went in front of me, I jumped on it without any reservation, good or bad, right or wrong.
Sure.
And sitting here now today, I had no one telling me. It just seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're in Vegas.
Yeah.
How'd the business went belly up, or?
I mean, no, I wanted to leave.
Okay.
And that's really the only reason why it stopped, because we were making money, and I mean, I was working way too much. I think at that time I was pulling in more than $10,000 a month. I mean, and that was it didn't really feel like work to me. And when I was 20, even 20s now, I think is $10,000 a month is high for
Sure.
a 20-something-year-old.
Without a
And then
doubt.
back then, I mean, not back then, you know what I'm saying? It still was.
Yeah.
So I felt great, but inside I was just like eating away. And it wasn't fulfilling. And that was, I think maybe when I look back, this is hindsight. So maybe I feel like that was the moment I realized that money's not going to bring you the full happiness. And from then to just continue to live passionately. But for me, it's not always about the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, money helps, definitely. And it's needed.
Right.
But if you're doing it for the money, are you doing it for the right reason? And how long is that actually going to last?
Yeah.
Right. So
Everybody has their own reasons. And some of that, some people are comfortable following that passion, and they may be poor their whole life, but they follow their passion, right?
Mhm.
Other people, and this is where I kind of veer off on that a little bit, is that people, if you're complaining about not having money, but you're following your passion that makes you no money, you have to figure which one of those out you're going to do.
Mhm.
And complaining incessantly about things that you want or something that you want, but at the same time, insisting that you're doing whatever job it is that is passion for you, those two don't marry up.
Mhm. Yeah. So back to what I said is if you're not happy with something, fix it. You know,
Right.
do
Change
something
it.
about it. And
Sure.
so that's what I did. I ended up going back home. And I
How was that? Was that
like-
hard to do, or?
Well, I didn't go home like to my parents' house or
Okay.
anything, but I went back to my hometown.
I see.
And I got my own apartment again. And, you know, it was kind of like, I was relieved because I knew I wasn't happy there. But it was an adjustment.
Yeah.
But I just kind of went right back into it. And so what I did was I took that model of what we created and elevated it a little bit and brought it back to my hometown where there was nothing of that kind. And I think that
But there was demand for it.
I do think, yeah, I mean, clearly because it was my successful business that I ran for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And it was basically like, if you could imagine the Pussycat Dolls.
Yeah.
Without the singing.
Okay.
In local lounges, concerts, you know, entertainment. That's basically what we did.
And how did you sell that?
How do I say-
How would you sell it? Would you go knock on doors of bars or entertainment places, or
You
did you
know,
run ads? How
I
did
really,
you?
No, ads were not a thing.
Yeah.
Ads were not a
I was
thing.
going to say, this
Social
is what,
media,
probably 10 years ago or so?
right? More.
Okay.
Well, no, not more. But yeah, social media was like not really a thing. Like people still had really shitty websites.
Right.
That's how far back. I mean, that wasn't that far that long ago. But you know, it was one of those things you just kind of have to get out into the actual networking aspect and in people's faces and supporting their bars, supporting their concerts, supporting their community events, and making yourself seen.
Networking.
That's the traditional
Just
form of
Spending lots of time in bars and at nightclubs and at concerts and venues like
and just,
that.
you know, of course, like the personality shines through, and of course, like, you know, you have to be presentable. You can't make an ass of yourself. All of those things add up to getting that business. And then, of course, making sure that your concept is wanted, right? And
Right.
like, it's not just something else that the next person is also selling. And so that was kind of like, I just elevated it by adding choreography, and then I added costume design that I was personally creating. And it was more of an experience that was collaborative with the other talent that was being brought in to make more of a live show, as opposed to like, oh, just go dance on that bar, you know, endlessly for the rest of the night.
Right. And was that you just coming to those conclusions that this is what people needed and then trying to sell it to them, or was it listening to the bar owners or listening to the girls?
No,
or
honestly,
how'd you come up with it?
It was more of like, you need this and I'm going to convince you that you do.
And why did you think they needed that?
I didn't see it. I
Okay.
didn't see it at all
But
in my city.
you thought it was, because you had seen it work in Vegas.
Right. I'd seen it work in Vegas, and then I went back into my hometown, and there, you know, go-go dancers were a thing, but it was just, I looked at it and I was like, this is like the bologna sandwich of a meal. and I want to give you a 5-course meal.
Right.
And, what comes with that. So it was more of like strategically figuring out.
Now, some of the cheapest people I've ever met in my life has been bar owners, and I've known quite a few of them. So how is that proposition as from a sales perspective and getting them to bite off on that?
I mean, it was tough, but you just kind of have to build relationship first and then ask for money.
Right.
It's just kind of how I still operate to this day. I mean, every day I'm in marketing and every day I'm building relationships and planting seeds and vetting people also. And then, it's a two-way street. So people also have to vet you before they can trust in you. They can see value in what you're providing.
Right.
As opposed to, hey, you've never met me before, but you need this. And people are going to be like, do I?
Yeah. See, I think that's critical from a business perspective. I think that one of the questions I get asked frequently is about the where are we entrepreneur wise today? And I think that there is a perception from an entrepreneur's perspective for young people in particular that you just walk up to that bar owner and he just gives you his business or she gives you her business. And when that doesn't happen and you get out there, all of a sudden you're going, well, what in the fuck? Wait a minute. I was told, I've seen it. I watched the YouTube video and this is what entrepreneurship is. And then pretty soon they're beside themselves, not knowing what to do because they're not prepared to go and do what skills you had naturally. And they're crushed.
I still see it. I see it all the time today.
I think it's worse today than it's ever been, and I think it's getting worse because media, in my opinion, media plays up the Facebooks of the world and all these big unicorn businesses that are started by these young people, and they hold that up as entrepreneurship when just you and I both know it's nothing could be further from the truth. It's what you said. It's relationship building and it's putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and learning how to communicate and then learning how to sell yourself. And then learning how to sell what you have. Right.
And then packaging that in a way that people are going to be like, they can understand it. It's clear and it's concise and they realize, oh, I do need this.
Yeah.
But it won't happen if you don't build it. Personally, from me, I mean, maybe it's, I'm not saying it can't be done because I'm sure people do it, but do you really want to be working with those people? For me, no. If someone allows some random person to come in and offer their service without this company have ever testing or using or learning anything about that, like what does that say about the relationship they'll have?
Right.
So, it's just each their own.
Right.
Of course, I personally would rather get to know the person, see how they deal with stress and how they communicate, how they treat people, how they operate. So forth.
I know very few CEOs or company owners, and I know a ton of people who own companies that don't have relationships. You can't have relationships with every customer, but your company can have relationships with those customers. And then I personally and have relationships that go back 20, 25 years when I was a dispatcher at a courier company that I had formed these relationships that I still have today. And I think that that's, for me, and my exposure to CEOs and to big businesses is they all have relationships with their customers. And that's the critical part, is that they can make that phone call when something goes south or they got something new that they want to sell. And the person on the other end of the line trusts them.
Yeah.
Right. Because they've built that up over time. Yeah. But that takes time. You're not going to walk in the door and sell to the bar owner the first day and then you go 4 for 4. No, it takes a long time.
Right.
Yeah. And we live in a world where everything is today.
Oh my gosh.
Instant gratification.
Yeah.
I'm in for the long haul. I'm not an instant gratification kind of person.
Yeah, you can't be. It doesn't sound like it though. It sounds like you, but again, no school or anything, right?
Well, I mean, I do now, but at the time, definitely not.
No school, I love that. Yeah.
I mean, it was just experience and intuition really at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I think that in a way, school might have gotten in the way of that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I was even going to fashion school because I'd kind of ventured off into, once I had kind of launched that entertainment side, I also wanted to provide, creative services to other small businesses. And it was an apparel company. And at the time, like I'm a crafty person. I inherited a gift from my grandmother, and I learned how to just sew and create jewelry and all these things at a young age. And I had started working with an apparel company before I'd even gone to any schooling. And I was still killing it. I was still crushing it. And I was still creating things because it just came from passion. And if you know how to listen to that voice in your head, I say it and it sounds weird, but it's intuitive. It's
right.
And so was like, oh, I really feel like I needed paper to validate me. And I had started going to fashion school to then create costumes for this entertainment company that I had created.
Okay.
And it only elevated my company, but I didn't need that paper.
Yes.
They didn't teach me anything new. Really, it was more about structure and like how to run a business. And I'm just like, get out of here. I don't need that.
Literally, Billy, I've never met her before, right? This is the first time. And anybody that listens to our podcast should recognize that I preach that because I have zero school. I mean, I was on the streets as a 17-year-old, late 16, almost 17 years old. I was living on the streets. I have zero education, but I had, you call it intuition. I had an ethic, a work ethic in particular that just told me to go and work. Mm-hmm. And I would have never been where I am had I stopped for myself and gone to school. So I don't think that's necessary. Adding to that, I had a kid come to me one time. This is just a couple of years ago. He's 20, about Billy's age, 25, 26. And he wanted a job working at Wyden and Kennedy. This is what he really wanted to do. But he's like, I don't have the right degree. I can't get in there. And I said, what are you talking about? It's not a right or wrong degree. Can you do the work? And then how do you show them that you can do the work? By cultivating those relationships. And it's probably going to take you 2 or 3 years to get in there. He wanted an interview. Walk in the door is why I say this instant gratification from an entrepreneurial perspective. He wanted that interview right away, and he thought that piece of paper would get him the interview, which would then get him the job. He didn't have the piece of paper, so he thought he was out. I said to him, I mean, people don't have zero education. It helps. Sure. But it's certainly not necessary. And here you are telling us exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Experience will always trump education, I think. I mean, unless you have a very technical position.
Yeah, maybe you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something. I mean, you have to go to school for that. But generally speaking, an engineer, but generally speaking,
even then,
well, you needed to stamp the piece of paper. The government makes you happen in order to operate as an engineer. You have to have that piece of paper. But yeah, I agree. I don't think that's necessary by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think we place too much emphasis on that rather than real world skills. I want to go back to something that you said earlier that this conversation is reminding me of. I got a job. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16 years old. And I say that I use skills that I learned at McDonald's when I was 16 years old still today. And we've done $500 million in revenue over the last 20 years. Skills I learned working at McDonald's. Wow. So those jobs, no matter what it is, those restaurant type jobs where you're in front of people and you have to learn to communicate, even if it's in the back, you're still having to work with the team. You're still having to operate equipment, timing, bells, whistles. Yep. There's some things that you have to do that are structured that I think are critical to learning how to work in the future. And I think as soon as you said that here, right when we started, I wanted to come back around to that because that was exactly my experience also.
Yeah, I think everybody, and I know a lot of people that would agree with this. I think everybody should have one restaurant or retail position in their life.
I agree. And the earlier, the better.
Yeah.
The younger you can get it, the better.
The older you get into it, you're going to have less patience for it.
Well, it's so hard to, when you live inside of your own, which we all do, we all kind of have our own clique or our own bubble when you're young in particular. And then all of a sudden you have to leave that and you got to go work the counter at Taco Bell, right? Well, that's way outside of your comfort zone because all you know is you've hung with your boys or your girls here for all of this time. And we all talk about the same things and we do the same things. And we have the same kind of interests and we're all relatively the same intelligence-wise. And there's nothing really challenging outside of that you ever put yourself up against. And you think, well, getting a job at Taco Bell, go get a waitress job, like you said, or go be a hostess where you have to interact with people on the fly every day. Yeah. Critical. Absolutely critical.
Yeah, I love the restaurant industry, and I have a profound respect for it at this age. Being in it still in a very different way, of course. I'm not, in the front of the house or back of the house and internally by any means, but, I'm coming at it from, a creative perspective, my agency, working with them. People suck sometimes. The customers, you know what I'm saying? Like, people are assholes, and one person can ruin your night, and there's a lot of factors. So
right.
But I still love. I have a lot of respect for the restaurant industry.
My mother was a waitress for her whole life, and a recurring theme on our podcast here is you fuckers better smile and say thank you and please to those waiters and waitresses, because that's about the hardest goddamn job in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And a good one makes it look simple, and then you got some asshole that walks in from his 9-to-5 job, and all of a sudden he goes, well, how hard can that be? She fucked up my fork.
Of course.
And next thing you know, you're taking it out. There's more than one time I've turned around and gone like, calm down. All right? She didn't do that on purpose.
Oh, really?
It's not. Oh, yeah, because there's not a harder. Again, my mother did it for 40 years. There's not a harder job in the world. And the good ones, like I said, make it look so simple that then we take them for granted. And then you add in the asshole factor, and all of a sudden somebody thinking they should, be slaved over simply because
the customer's always right.
The customer's always
They're
right.
not.
Yeah. And you can tell when a good waitress is really doing everything that she can to keep the conversation in check, and you're like, man, she's fantastic, but sometimes it goes too far, and sometimes I can't take it. I have to say something, because it's like, I taught my kids, we eat out a lot, okay, and so I taught my kids, you're not ordering if you don't look them in the eye, say please and thank you. You don't get anything, because they're not robots, they're not animals, right? And you sit there with your menu in front of you and not even look up. So if you're sensitive spot for me.
No.
Good for you. That's because that's and it's underappreciated in our society, I believe, how hard the people that work in restaurants and in food services and hospitality, how hard that is.
Yeah, sometimes I would say most of the time, a lot of the times, depending on where you work, you gotta bite your tongue a lot.
Yeah.
And that can be hard for some people, but it grows on you, and
because people are fucking assholes all the time. Yeah, no,
so
I know.
I made a switch. So I had finished that. I had a 10-year mark actually with that company, but it grew. It was much more than just dance. We ended up doing our own production, our own concerts. I had a team of 30.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it snowballed out of control. It was insane. I loved it. And I had so many dancers, and they were just very supportive, and they were loved, and it was great. But I had a 10-year mark, and I had kind of wanted to step back.
So this is what year to what year? How old were you to 10 years?
Yeah. It was, I think, maybe around 2012-ish, something like that. And I had just felt like I wanted to step back. I wanted to become healthier. And in those industries, there's a lot of late hours. There's, undoubtedly a lot of booze and whatever else. It's just sometimes toxic environments in general. And I wanted to take a step back and still have the business run, but start something new, put someone else in charge, still creatively direct and oversee. And, it ended up falling through for reasons I don't want to mention. And I had a point. I was like, I gotta go. I gotta leave. And it was at its peak.
Right.
And it was so hard to let go, because some of my dancers were about to go on tour.
Wow.
With a band across the US. And I pulled the plug 2 months before and decided I just couldn't handle anymore. And I didn't want to, I was burning out.
Yeah.
I was legit burning out, but I didn't take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have only myself to blame for that.
Looking back on it, what would you have done differently? Let me ask this question differently. Looking back on it, could you have kept it going by doing something differently?
Oh, yeah.
What would you
definitely.
Have done?
Well, there's a few things that come to mind immediately. For one, I would have eaten better.
No, that's good. Simple.
I mean,
right.
it's the small things that make a vast difference. So definitely have eaten better. I would have taken more time for myself to disconnect because I didn't do that. I was just always in it and it never stopped.
Okay.
And I was always available. And I think, cutting yourself off at certain points of the evening or the night. But because that industry, you go into the night, those lines become blurred and there was no really like stopping point. So those two things would have made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Do you think the availability was crucial to growing it to where it was, though? If you weren't able to give it your all 24 hours a day, do you think it could have gotten where it was?
Yeah, I do think. I think if I had accepted more, maybe not accepted more support, but maybe leaned in intentionally on more support.
You could balance it.
I.e., having more directors, more managers.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I don't know if it was an intentional. I had to have all the control, and I had leads, but maybe they could have been stepped up.
Well, without a doubt, I think that what you learn as you get older as an entrepreneur and in business is that you can't do everything. So when I was in my 20s and 30s,
yes,
I could do fucking everything. Didn't matter what it was, right? And then as I'll give a case in point is I used to pay all my own bills. Now I sound like an asshole saying this, right? But stay with me, people. So I'm paying my electric bill and I'm paying my water bill and I'm making my mortgage payment and I'm doing all this. And I have an assistant, but and my company's growing exponentially, right? I have hundreds of employees at this point, but here I am still every Friday or what it was. And this is the old days. So I'm writing checks, right? And Brooke, who's still my assistant now, 20 years later, is like, what the fuck are you doing? Right? Give that to me. And just giving that up, because I'm like, who am I? I'm a poor kid from the streets. I can pay my own goddamn bills, right?
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, when you got rid of that responsibility, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm thinking different now, right? I don't have to worry about doing that every Friday at 6:00 for an hour, paying my bills. Someone else does it. Now my time is spent either constructively for me or it's spent doing something else that's building the business. And so, but it took me 35, right? And maybe 38. I mean, it took me a decade of having my own business, and not until I was 38 to realize that I needed help, right? And that I needed help, and also help was going to push me forward, that I could do more with help than I couldn't. I wish I could go back to 25, 28 years old and realize that and know that then, because I think I would have had a much easier time of it. But I think when we're kids, we don't really.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to see that perspective, I mean, I accepted a lot of help still, but there were a lot of things looking back that I could have let someone else do.
Yeah. Right.
And I do think that it could have gotten huge. It could have gotten bigger. We had a lot of plans, but because I got to that point that I did, I was like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
I gotta tap out, guys.
Right.
And a lot of people cried.
Yeah.
A lot of people
That's
cried.
got to be really difficult to do, to just let go like that. That's not a decision you make overnight or lightly.
No. And it didn't, it went on for about a couple of months.
I was going to say just going to ask you, from the time that it kind of entered into your consciousness to the time you did it, how long was that?
Well, once I made the decision that I started to accept what I needed to do, it was almost 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you know that that's what you need to do? Again, intuition, that inner voice telling you?
I felt it. It was like this bottling up and I'm about to implode kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And nobody likes that feeling, right?
I think that's very interesting, because I think, and I know I do, most of us ignore that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to listen to that voice and pay attention to it.
Yeah. That's also what creates anxiety. It's just unchanneled and not dealt with.
Yeah.
That creates that bottleneck.
That you knew to do that so young too. Somebody telling you, or you just instinctively knew it? Yeah. You just had it. You just had it inside you.
Psychic abilities run in my family. So I just instinctively knew. I didn't know how to go about it. I was just like, I need out.
Right. You just knew the end result was going to be this. How you got there, you had to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, and I had my family supporting me. They're like, well, what do you want to do? And we're here for you. And it took someone coming into my life, a special someone that, I don't know, he was like a guiding light at some point and told me it was okay to let go. And it was okay to let some people down and move back into your parents, because that's what I did. And
Right.
that, I think maybe a lot of that was like, shit, if I do this, like, where am I going to go? You know,
Right.
what's next? And it was pride, I think, a lot of pride that
Sure.
I didn't want to move back into my parents, because that's like, who does that? And I had been gone for so long.
Yes.
But it was needed. And so
In the end, the best thing for you at that point?
probably one of the better decisions I've made in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it allowed me to like really step back and cleanse and find myself. And
Funny how the hardest ones are usually the best ones. Yeah. It seems to always be the case.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
comes to an end. You're living in Phoenix, mom and dad's house.
Yep.
What happens next?
I took a break. I took about a year off.
Wow. What'd you do for a year?
I
Just fucked it off? Or?
just fucked around. I just kind of went back to exploring all of my creative outlets, and I was like painting, and I was like creating jewelry, and I was dancing more, just personally, and working out a lot and yoga. And I had just found alternative medicine at that point, because I've never been like, I'm gonna pop a pill and feel better kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I very much enjoy plants, because I think, you know, we walk outside and there's so much medicinal property around us. And so I had found alternative medicine, which was yoga and like, well, what do you know, vitamins and like herbs that
Right.
can make us feel an amazing, like a completely different person. And so I kind of explored that whole world. And when I was ready to step back into it, I went back into like my creative writing, and then started photography again. And
you're how old at this point?
I was 25-ish,
Oh, wow.
26-ish, or no, I was about 27 actually.
Okay.
My dates are off.
Yeah.
A little blurry. But yeah. And
So
then,
somewhere around 27, you take a year off, but that year was spent, you were busy.
Oh
and you
no.
had-
That when I came out of it,
Yeah.
I was like, I think I was 26. When I
Okay.
was 27. I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. But yeah, I took a break, and then I came back in it, and then I had started working just to get my flow back.
Let me ask you before you tell us that, in the year that you took off and the things that you got into,
Yeah.
did you get into them the same way and with kind of the same personality that you were into the work that you had left, or were you much more subdued?
The latter.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
I
You learned from what you had experienced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I had kind of figured out patience, I think, at that point.
Okay.
And a more mindful way of thinking, and a more holistic, so like bigger picture kind of thing, and
Mhm.
how can I prevent this from ever happening again? And that was the kicker, really. I came out of that and I was like, this can never happen again.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to burn out again, because that's not a good feeling. But I mean, it was a shift. That was that was a chapter. It was over with. It was done, and there was a fork in the road, and I decided to go off this way, and with this new mindset.
Well, I think that's I think that's a point that should be reiterated again, because so many times it's been my experience that we make that mistake and then we double down on that mistake, because it wasn't my fault that I burnt out. It wasn't my fault that I felt this way. Because human beings, it's so difficult for us to take on that responsibility and say, I made this mistake or I did that mistake. And so self-assessment and introspection are two things that I preach every single day. And your example is perfect for why that is so important, regardless of the age.
Oh, yeah. Self-development has always been kind of a thing that I just have done in my downtime, and reading self-help books, and
Never hurt your feelings being critical of yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, and I think that self-assessment it's just needed. You know, perhaps not done enough.
Perhaps not done enough, I think, is an understatement.
Yeah. So I just kind of owned up to it and was like, okay, how do I do this better?
Yeah. Okay. So now you take the year off, and somehow you're going to make it to Portland.
Well, yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, there's so much that happened in between that and now.
You decide to get back into it.
Got
and
back
how'd you do that?
Got back into, so I had actually teamed up with a talent agency, not mine. That agency was done with. And then, so I had teamed up with a talent agency in Scottsdale. That's where I spent most of my life, Scottsdale. And I got back into marketing. I wanted to still be around people and connect and socially engage and provide service. So I was thinking about how can I do that without being in that, the entertainment world.
Right.
And that side of hospitality. So I went into experiential marketing. And
into what?
Experiential marketing.
Okay.
And I had actually dabbled in that the entire time I was still running my previous agency. But when I came back, that's what I went full force with. And so experiential marketing is it's traditional marketing. It's events, it's connecting, it's doing pop-ups, it's trade shows, it's conventions, that nature road shows and that kind of thing where, it's not digital. I was still not digital at that point.
Wow. And this is 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, so absolutely. So social media really didn't take off. I mean, it was a thing, but definitely not like now.
Right.
And so I was managing 300 events a month across the entire West Coast. And it was gnarly. And so being the entrepreneur spirit I just got fed up with working for someone else, really.
Right.
And felt confident enough to start my own thing again. And so I did that with the blog. I started blogging and creative writing, and then I rapidly became sponsored, and Adidas and Nike and all these fitness brands were coming to me because I was highly into yoga. And so that spiraled. And then, a shift happened. So I'll skip a lot of that because it's kind of boring. And it was time for me to leave Arizona. Have you ever been to Arizona?
Yeah, it's hot as hell.
It's hot as fuck. It's not enjoyable.
Right.
And
that in Vegas, it's fucking hot.
I mean, and I was in and out of Southern California my entire life, and that's the best you can get in terms of Southwest and the weather. But I just had a point where I was I felt like I was on fire inside, and I had to go. And it was one of those moments again where I was I need to leave, and I'm not going to thrive here if I stay.
Right.
And I wanted to thrive. I was ready, and it was about to come out again because I had given myself a break. And some life circumstances came about, and I ended up moving to Colorado. My mom and my stepdad had lived there. They still do. And I saw a way out. I didn't move with them. I moved to Denver, and they live, south of it. But I just wanted out.
And so you started your own once you got to Denver?
I was still doing my thing. I was still doing my blog and, my creative stuff. And I was doing a lot of marketing and ambassadorships and photography for it. But
ambassadorships. What's that?
So it's much like an influencer, but it's a more meaningful approach and a little bit more internal with a company as opposed to just getting hired one-off.
Okay.
And, style this product.
I see,
for me.
I got you, a brand ambassador. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I got really heavy into that and was doing a lot of marketing campaigns for them, creating them, developing them, executing them, implementing them. And I was still, in Denver working for someone else still, because when you move and uproot yourself so much, it's hard to just continue to hit the ground running and have it be sustainable. So
easiest way to make contacts, right?
Yeah, I supplemented it with another job and ended up working in the massage industry. And that was short-lived. That was maybe about 8 months in Denver. And I was I need to get to Portland.
And had you ever been to Portland?
I had, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, several times prior to that. And I fell in love.
Okay. Just from visiting it.
Yeah, just from visiting.
That's what we hear. So I'm born and raised here. So, and the thing I hear the most from people who've moved here, particularly from the East Coast, is I have a buddy in Boston, and I mean, he's crazy about Portland. And again, I've lived here my whole life. So,
wow.
I mean, it's Portland.
I know,
it's
right?
great, right?
Yeah. Well, have you ever left? and like lived somewhere else?
I lived in Montana when I was a teenager for a year, and I hated it because I lived in the inner city, went to Grand High School here in Portland, and for about 8 months. I had an older sister of mine died on her 21st birthday of all times.
Sorry to hear that.
And so my parents uprooted and moved and bought a pizza joint in, I think it was called Shithole, Montana. I'm not exactly sure what the name of it was. Gardner, Montana, which is this little tiny town. Well, I said, fuck that. I'm not going. I was 13 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, I'm not going. So I stayed here with a teacher. And that quickly blew up after 8 months because I was a punk. And so I ended up living in Montana for the rest of that year. So for about 8 months. Other than that, I've lived in Portland my whole life. I was born in Medford.
Okay.
I moved here when I was a little kid. So, yeah. But when those people from out of town come and move here, like I said, my buddy from Boston is just like, I mean, the look on people's face. And I go, I don't know, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's like the heart eye emoji.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
That's how I still walk around. And I've been here for 3.5 years.
We were, I have family, my wife has family in Tennessee, and they came out here, and we were driving over to Central Oregon. And we get up. And we're going up around on 26, which is by the mountain. And all of a sudden, out of the back seat, driving an SUV, there's about 7 of us in there. Out of the back seat, I hear, "Oh, pull over, pull over!" And I think, either somebody's got to go to the bathroom or someone's going to the bathroom, right? Because there was this big sense of urgency, or there's a dead animal in the road or something.
Oh my gosh.
So I pull over, and they all pile out of the car, and I'm completely oblivious to what they're pulling over.
I know what you're going to say.
You know what I'm saying? Off to the left is this giant mountain that I've looked at every day for my entire life. And they are just like, we don't have mountains. And they are sitting there staring at Mount Hood in wonderment. Now, and we've talked about this before, anybody that doesn't understand what we're talking about, Mount Hood frames Portland. So almost from everywhere on a clear day, you're staring at Mount Hood. And I live east of the city, which is where Mount Hood is. So every day for the last 15, 20 years, that mountain, as long as the sun's shining, is right in front of me.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think it opened my eyes to how special it is here, because they're like, you go an hour and you got windsurfing, and you go an hour and you've got desert, and you go an hour and you've got the coast, and you go an hour, you got the mountain. And I was like, this isn't how it is everywhere.
Right. Oh gosh. You have such a skewed perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
So coming from someone,
I've lived here my whole life.
Right.
Yeah.
In Arizona, I wanted seasons. That's like what I wanted.
Yeah.
I didn't know how I was going to achieve that. I was like, I just need seasons, because this hot bullshit year round is ridiculous. And I also played competitive sports my entire life. So that combined with, excess, like rigorous workouts, you just like become a flame. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I was just mesmerized by all the trees and the green and the depth and the seasons, but also how you can get to the coast and the mountains and rivers and all these things within less than an hour and a half.
Right.
It's crazy to me.
Right.
But I fell in love with that.
Right. That's cool.
So
that's cool. And if you're like me, I love it. The more the merrier. Or like lots of people in Portland.
Yeah.
Hate that.
Stop coming here.
Because they say stop coming here.
You know what? If they were to leave and go somewhere else, how would they feel? If someone said that to them.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
no, I always think the more the merrier.
Sure.
I mean, it's such a special place that, and I've learned that now that I didn't realize that before. Probably now that I've been everywhere, I don't know of any other place. Like, it's funny, my same family down in Tennessee, what they call a lake or a river, what they call a river, I was like, no.
That's a creek. That's a pond.
That is not a river. I mean, the Mississippi is, but you'd have to drive to that. I said, but let me tell you what a river or multiple rivers are, because we live here.
Yeah, you're spoiled.
The spoiled rotten. So 3.5 years, you come to Portland.
Yeah.
And opened up your own.
Yeah, I ended up teaming up with Ben, who he knows. He's my life partner, but also business partner.
Okay.
It kind of started off interesting. Like, I was helping him. So I started doing before I got here, I started doing a lot of branding and marketing, and I just started packaging everything I've done over the past 18 years and just package it into basically like a media company. And when I met with him, I was helping him kind of brand himself. And I was just like, I don't know. I just had this light bulb go off, and I was like, oh, you do all the things that I can't provide people, and vice versa. Why don't we just
put it together,
combine it, and be a force? And so we did.
So what is, if you were, you had a new client, what is something that you would advise them branding wise? What's mistakes that people make that you see? If somebody's trying to build a brand either for themselves or a product, what would you say is something that people do wrong?
Oh gosh, I could fill a few pages. I would say not bringing the human element into their brand.
Yes.
And that's what's going to help, at least vastly, by bringing that to life and bringing the vision to life. And I feel like a lot of people hide behind the screen and, getting out of that, like being okay with being in front of the camera and having the spotlight on you and sharing, quote unquote, I hate saying this, but sharing your story.
Right.
It's so cliche to say now. But like literally getting in front of your brand, you know, and if you legit can't, then find someone who can be that spokesperson, because I think not humanizing your brand is limiting. Right.
And I think that's that goes along with what's his name, Billy? The Matt went to work with in New
Gary?
York. Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk. And one of the things that he says, he's a branding guy, and
I know.
You know who it is.
Oh, I know.
Is to document. What is he? Don't produce it, but document it.
Yeah.
So just that day-to-day reality.
Some of the stuff he says, I love him. I love what he does. I respect it. But some of the stuff he says is very unrealistic to the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
You can't, sometimes it's not, I wouldn't say it's impossible to document everything, but it's a task, right?
Sure.
That's a chore. If that's where you want to be, then you need to do that. But that doesn't work for everyone and everything.
Yeah. There's many things that we disagree.
I love listening to him. Actually, his energy sometimes gets me way too wound up. Yeah. But he has a lot to say. Yeah. And it's great on most levels. And I like how he just says fuck all the time. Just like
what I like, and I don't listen to him that much, but I'm aware of him and listen to some of his podcasts. And what I do like about him is what I like about our conversation, which is just go the fuck out and do it.
Yeah.
Right? Don't, like we said earlier, don't make excuses. Don't look for reasons. Just go fucking start. Try. Believe in yourself and go do it. And if you fail, learn from it, realize it, and move on. And that was critical for you. That was critical for me. And that's clearly was critical for him. So anybody with a platform that big, talking to that many people, if that's what people hear, fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that's the message that I really take from him, is that there's a lot of people telling you don't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's where you said your family supported you so well as an example. So many families are toxic in the opposite direction.
I know. I'm very fortunate that I have such a supportive family. I've never really, and I say this not in like a spoiled, privileged way, but there wasn't a lot of no happening. There wasn't a lot of no being said to me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's helped
right.
in many ways.
Right. Yeah. I think that family part is equal parts critical to success as it is a detriment to getting out or achieving success. Where I come from, and I say that I call it institutional poverty. Right, because that's where I come from. My grandparents and my parents and I have 8 brothers and sisters, and all of them their kids. And I have kids I went to school with who are grandparents and about to become great grandparents that are my age. Right, so they got pregnant at 14 or 15 or 16, and their kids got pregnant at 14 or 15, and now the new kid is pregnant at 14 or 15 or 16, and so it's that it never changes, and those parents in almost every circumstance don't want their kids doing better than them. If it's good enough for them to live like this, it's good enough for their kids, and the few that get out seem to have that support, and maybe that support is just go try. I don't know what the answer is, but fly, bird. Right. Go do it. Yeah. Rather than you'll never amount to anything. You're a loser.
Wow. Yeah. It's unfortunate that that's a thing.
Right.
That happens.
So your business now, here you are in Portland, 3.5 years, you and your partner, and you are helping companies, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Mostly small to medium scale businesses.
Okay.
Just I like the development aspect of helping a business as opposed to going into, a corporate company who, doesn't really need their shit like they got their shit together.
Right.
Like that's not my ideal client.
Do you find that every company in that size, small to medium, in some way could use improvement on branding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say that even about multi-million-dollar companies,
Could do it better.
They suck. Like there's some of their shit is just terrible.
Right.
Their websites. I mean, we say it all the time. I mean, we to ourselves all the time. They could have better branding, but it's like, okay, well, branding is not everything. Brand is, because there are multi-million-dollar companies that have a 90s inspired website who don't have materials, who they don't have a digital footprint, they don't have all those things, and they're still successful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to wonder, like, okay, well, how are they doing that?
Right.
Right. And it's a different type of market. They're not reaching the community in most cases.
Yes.
Right. Like they're the back end. They have mostly back end processes. And I'm speaking just on a corporate level.
Right.
And that's not across the board, of course, but the type of people we help are trying to reach an audience actively and get in front of their audience and engage with their audience and cultivate that audience. And so it's usually products, food and beverage products, wineries, restaurants, hotels, any lifestyle brand really that creatively connects.
I'm guessing beer here in Portland.
Yeah, we actually haven't worked with too many beer companies, and I don't know, maybe
there's one on every corner.
There is.
Go walk around the block. I'm sure there's 2 customers waiting for you.
I know, right? I know. We just haven't approached too many of them, actually.
Oh, you would think your wine experience would help you on that side.
Yeah, and then we just haven't moved in that direction.
Okay.
We really like the wine industry. There's a lot of really great stories. It's a rabbit hole in Oregon.
Yes, it is.
And not just the wine country. It's it's Southern Oregon. It's Eastern. It's Hood River. It's Portland. There's so many little pockets of wine production that have fascinating wines and stories, and they're like little microclimates anywhere you go. They're different from each other, and it's fascinating, and it's a lot of science too. So I love
alcohol in general in Oregon, because we're starting to get a name for our vodkas and spirits. As much as we are for our wine, and then of course our beer. That beer's that's been around for 20 years or so. How about, I have 2 more questions. One is, what's your take on the way that the marijuana industry is branding themselves? And I have an opinion, so I'll tell you what that is. To me, it all looks fairly the same, and it's hard to discern one from the other. So I haven't seen anybody break out, or there's some sort of breakout brand in Portland, at least, in that business.
Well, they have a lot of laws that they can't break. It's tough for them to get a digital footprint because you can't post certain things. Photos of certain things are prohibited. And so they have their own set of complications. But I think that it's coming around. I really haven't tapped into that market. Ben keeps saying that we need to. Yeah. CBD this, and let's get ahead. And I'm like, okay, go for it. Yeah. I'm like,
there's a huge consolidation happening in that business right now, and so I would think that it would be ripe for somebody to try to grow that brand, at least in the cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's
because it was a bunch of mom and pops and very small shops and small growers and all of that, and kind of there was a recession, if you will, in the pot industry because there was too many people, too many licenses, too much growing. And I think it's something like 500 went out of business last year between retail and the growers.
Wow.
A lot. And so there's a big consolidation happening. And I thought, I mean, for what that is and the amount of money that generates, that somebody would be
right.
branding themselves as, you know, I don't know the first thing about pot or
Right.
any of that, but you know, ours is the best and exclusive, and it's grown in peat moss in a marsh and you know, whatever. I don't have
I think
any
that
idea.
there's so much that we don't see
Yeah.
in terms of the laws and what they can abide or what they have to abide by. But
Right.
that's ultimately stopping them.
Right.
Well, I know like within the electronic cigarette industry and like them creating the juices that are mixed with nicotine, they, especially Oregon's passed a whole lot of laws that's like you can't name it anything that sounds sweet or fruity or anything altogether. So
I
now
totally smoke Fruit Loops here.
What?
If they had a Fruit Loop flavored one,
so
so
now
I can.
you can't name it Fruit Loops.
Yeah, I'd vape Fruit Loops on a heartbeat.
So now they changed the name, so they have to, instead of Fruit Loops, they can call it FL.
No,
But you can't.
I mean, I'm not a government guy, so I would never agree with any of that. But I do understand that because when I had gas stations and convenience stores, those fucking grape cigarettes, whatever they were called, you know,
The Swishers?
the Swishers,
Yes.
and they were grape. I could just sit there and smell. I'm sure it tasted like shit, but
No,
if
they
it,
don't.
Oh, is that right?
No,
if it
I-
tasted
They're
as
pretty good.
half as good as it smelled, those grape ones, is why I always wanted to smoke a pipe. I've never
Yeah.
smoked before in my life, so, but if I were to, I would smoke a pipe because if it tastes half as good, but you told me it
I
tastes
think-
like shit.
Well, I mean, I'm not an avid consumer, but if I do and when I do, it definitely needs to be wrapped in a Swisher.
Yeah, okay. All right, so you're saying the next one, you just grab one of those grape ones and go to town on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
see what
why
it
not?
tastes
Yeah.
like.
He's smelled pipe tobacco is what he's referring to, and
It
like,
smells so good.
but I'm telling him if you take a puff off of it, it's not going to taste
It's just
anything
gonna-
like what it
it's
smells
just going
like.
to ruin 50 years of smelling pipes, and
Yep.
out the door it's going to fly because it's going to. Well, I had my buddy bought me we were in Vegas one time. Speaking of Vegas, we were at MGM, and he bought me he's like, you got to smoke a cigar. Knowing I don't smoke at all, he's like, it's so good, and and you know, you see people smoke cigar. All right, I'll try a cigar, and the goddamn thing cost me like $18 for this fucking cigar. I don't know if that's expensive or cheap. It seemed expensive to me.
Is that right?
And I took one pull on it, and I didn't do anything with it but cough it back, and then I handed it to him, and I was like,
That's
nope.
rough. Yeah.
Nope.
There was a time I got into cigars. Don't ask why or how, but there were the little tiny ones that looked like little cigarettes.
Mm.
You know what I'm talking about? They're
Yeah.
they're rolled really small.
Okay.
They're like this big, and they're it was fancy at one
Just like
point.
little
but
mini cigars.
They're like mini, but I mean, even that was rough.
Yeah, and you didn't like. Yeah, I don't. That's
I've never been a smoker,
yeah, me
like
either.
with cigarettes, and I mean, I used to be a huge pot smoker, but after I left Arizona, it started to have an adverse effect on me. So I just decided to stop cold turkey, and I do every now and then, but yeah, all that like the cigars, it's really hard. Like right here,
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
much.
No, I don't. I never tried, but God, it smells good. And those grape ones.
So
Just,
do you drink at all?
no.
You don't know?
No, I
like,
mean,
no?
I drink probably. When was the last time I drink to get drunk? Right. So
Oh.
I'm on a program when I do it. I straight shoot vodka.
Wow.
Usually, Grey Goose would be if they don't have Belvedere. So Belvedere or Grey Goose vodka, and I will, 12 or 15 or 20 shots, and because I'm on a program.
Okay, okay.
And so I've probably been drunk twice in the last 2 or 3 years. It's just in a special
gotcha.
event thing.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
no, I don't.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Casually
I
drink.
I just try not to get drunk at this point. And I work with so many wine brands and spirits as well that you have to be able to like limit that. And
Yeah.
I'm going to tasting rooms all the time and wine events and sponsored this and that and private invitations. And it's a constant.
Well,
That's a
isn't that
thing.
interesting then that you've kind of come back around full circle
Mhm.
from when that devastated you in your early 20s when you were
Right.
doing that with the dancing and the bars and all that, and now it's not much
Sound like a
different in that. Go-go dancers, I should say.
It was really not even go-go because there was choreography involved. So I like to say performer.
Performer.
Yeah.
But again, in bars and in
Sure.
those kind of places, and obviously it had that big effect on you. Now you've come back around. It's all right here in front of you, but
Yeah.
you've got the skills now to limit yourself.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of it's done during the day, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a different vibe.
Yeah, it
you
seems
know?
weird to be getting hammered at noon.
It happens.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It definitely happens. I mean, I wouldn't say hammered, but I mean, there's a couple of bottles involved sometimes. You just never know.
Right.
Especially like one of my clients, and actually she's become a partner of mine. She actually has a wine podcast. It's called Wine Crush Podcast.
Wow.
And anytime we go to the record, so it's powered by Portland Radio Project. And anytime we go there for a recording, you know, she interviews winemakers, and they're kind of instructed to bring stuff.
Sure,
and
right.
that's why it's just, I brought J. Wrigley Vineyards bubbles right now, because you just never know.
Bubbles,
champagne.
Oh, okay.
Sparkling wine.
They make champagne here in Oregon.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's calling it champagne, because I think you just can't do that.
Right.
It's
not from that part of France or something.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's sparkling wine, but it's definitely bubbles. And it's very carbonated. Would you like to see it?
I absolutely would. Yeah.
Okay.
So particularly since you brought it.
I will. So we'll go to these podcast recordings, right? And we're drinking. We're drinking while we podcast. And it's not filmed, so.
Right.
Although we are working on a second project that will be filmed, but on location.
Neat.
But like a next year thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But yeah, I mean, so that's at like noon.
Right.
And we leave and we're just like, woo, we're next. Where to?
Feeling no pain at 2:30 in the afternoon.
You know, it helps people talk. I think drinks in general, wine especially, creates conversation.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons why I love the wine industry is just here, have a glass, and it kind of instantly loosens people up.
I've never drank wine. And when I was a kid, I was a very violent kid. And so if I got drunk, I was a terrible, terrible drunk. And I knew this about myself. So I was like, you're going to just go to jail, quit drinking. So I didn't touch it. There, nobody can hear that. So I didn't touch it forever. And what I always said was that kind of, like you said, that release that people talk about and this kind of frees you up. I'm kind of high on air. Right. I love to live and life. And for me, I never felt the need to augment that to say something that I would otherwise maybe not. Yeah. Because I'm pretty open and honest and straightforward. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think
but I do like to get hammered. I will say when I do it, I do like to get hammered.
Take a look at that.
So this is one of the brands you're representing? Mm-hmm. Jubilation J. Wrigley Vineyards, Oregon sparkling wine.
Yeah, and it is. So that's a Pinot Noir rosé, and it is absolutely delicious. And they're actually out at the tasting room, and I have all.
Now this is refrigerated.
Well, it was in the fridge here.
Okay.
And then I took it out for the.
And that's the best way to keep it is refrigerated?
Definitely. You want to keep that chilled. I mean, same with any like whites and rosés as well. You want to keep those chilled. They do not taste the greatest. It's just like warm beer. You wouldn't want to drink warm beer, right?
Right.
Right, Billy?
Right, Billy.
I don't drink beer.
Oh, speaking of beer.
No, we both have the same take on beer. We tried it when you're 15 years old. I was like, fuck you people. This thing tastes like shit.
You live in Portland.
Don't touch it.
Have you attempted to try any of these craft beautiful beverages?
I'll take a sip, but I won't buy an IPA.
Yeah, neither will I.
It just tastes like crap.
IPA is not the only beer.
Well, any
so
craft brewery.
I get this. I get
ciders. I love ciders, and I'll drink all kinds of ciders.
And along those lines, I will get that thing. That Hefeweizen or whatever that beer is. Look at that and the way they package it, and it looks in that glass, and I'm like, fuck, I got to try one of those. And then I take a sip and I'm like, what? How many times am I going to fall for this? Because I just don't like it.
Okay, so speaking of brand and beers and like wine, there's so much behind the scenes that happens with the production. That is the kind of thing that should be documented all the time.
Yeah, right.
It's not. You'd be surprised. And I don't know what it is. And I think this goes back to not delegating. Right. And knowing that you need support, but not figuring out a way to get it, because a lot of teams are limited.
Right.
And you guys need to just cut that shit out.
Right.
And hire some people.
and just show what happens. I think people are so protective of their businesses, are so protective of that brand.
I think
too.
that's going to change, because the way I follow marketing trends like no other. And where we're at with society, and we've had our heads down for so long in our phones because we went into this like digital world. I think it's still there, but people are starting to look up, right? And they want that experience.
Yeah.
They want to know how you're making this. They want to know where the food's coming from. They want to know who's making it. They want to see the food being made. That's why there's a lot of open concept restaurants now, right? When you see all the line cooks and the chefs and all of that happening.
I love that shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And why do you love it?
P.F. Chang's.
Why
The Chinese place, man,
what do
watching
you
those
love
dudes.
about that?
Because it's a symphony.
Okay.
And back to my point about people don't appreciate how hard that work is. When I was 12 years old, other people, we've talked about this before. When I was 12 years old, I had a job at International House of Pancakes. I didn't want to shit on your point, but I got my first job at 11.
See, that's why I was like, it may not be that young, but it was young for me.
I was working in a restaurant washing dishes at a local restaurant, and then IHOP hired me at 12, and I went and washed dishes on Saturday and Sunday morning. And it was absolutely a symphony how they came in and everything worked together. And if you didn't do it right and on time and load and unload and move and all of the pieces that come to it, there wasn't food at the far end if you didn't take care of the dirty plate when it came in on the other end.
Yeah.
And so I thought, man, this is a skill. I didn't look at it as a menial job. I looked at it as a skill, and I'm like, I'm 12 years old. You all can go fuck yourselves because I'm washing dishes at IHOP, busy as shit by myself. So I like people to see that, and those cooks were amazing in a busy restaurant. It's just to turn out a plate or turn out food to 10 people and it's all hot and it's 10 different things is fucking magic. But we take it for granted because it happens theoretically so easily and we can't ever see it. Well, let's show that cook at P.F. Chang's just over that hot goddamn grill. It just makes me appreciate the food that much more when you see what goes into cooking it. So to your point, that authenticity, I think, has great value, and we've lost that, or I don't think we've ever gotten it. Maybe we're going that way on the internet and social media,
Definitely.
Because everybody's life looks fantastic and taking fake pictures in front of a Ferrari and shit like that.
I think that it's changing gears and veering off that path. Yeah, because there's so many people's self-esteem now at this point that are like, I'm not worthy. I don't have that fucking beautiful of a life. I don't have this beautiful bathroom like that I'm taking pictures in. And so a lot of brands are switching to that authentic lifestyle, that authentic content creation.
Yes.
Where they're just showing like, this doesn't need to be highly produced.
Something relatable.
Very relatable. This doesn't need to be ultra curated.
Right.
It's just, I mean, of course, don't take a picture in the dark and expect people to like it.
Right,
right.
You got to give it some thought, but at the same time, I think relatable is
attainable.
Attainable is a good word too, Billy. I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, and then at the same time, they got to learn.
Coming in here with that one word,
plus the word I don't give a fuck.
You mind?
No, have at it. Is the other part of this is just, people can't give a fuck and they do too much and their self-esteem's tied up in how many likes they got and all the rest of that. And I just don't see the value there, but I see the pain that it causes, like you said, people living vicariously through their Instagram.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think at this point, the marketing trends are taking people out and bringing that same experience into going back to traditional marketing and experiential marketing. And if brands are not on board with this yet and have the ability to, they're missing out.
Yeah.
But that's why there's Portland's a perfect place to do it because, there's a small window until you are drenched in rain, but taking that experience outside and even being in this urban forest, your backdrop is unreal. Yeah. And there's so many possibilities. I was just in the Tillamook Forest yesterday with one of my spirits clients, Jazz Spirits, and
Jazz
Spirits,
Jazz,
1Z,
Jazz, Jazz Spirits.
It's their initials for her kids.
Okay,
actually, so anyway, I documented so she forages her botanicals to make the gin and vodka.
Wow,
and I was there documenting her berry foraging experience.
That sounds like a shitload of work.
No.
No?
I was double fisting it. I was just like...
a shitload of work on her part to get that stuff together.
I mean, there's always planning involved,
Yeah.
but it was a small group and we just kind of trekked and carpooled. And then she knew exactly, she's also a native and she's been foraging and picking berries and other herbs with her family since she was a little girl.
Wow.
So she was like a natural tour guide. And she led these people on identifying certain berries and which are edible and, when they're ripe and when not to pick them and that kind of thing. And then after that experience, she set up this beautiful cocktail experience. Like she made cocktails right in front of us and then foods using those berries. I have pictures. I'll show you guys later. But it was amazing. But that's a perfect example of humanizing your brand.
Right.
And taking not just about buy my gin, buy my vodka.
Yeah.
It's let me take you behind the scenes and show you how this is done.
Right.
And giving people that insight of like, how is it made? Who's
I
making
agree.
it?
I think it's one of the things that no connection at all to what she's making versus say a national brand or an international brand. But Jack Daniels, to anybody that lives in Tennessee, it's revered, and the water that comes out of the ground back in the back cave, and then the gin or the whiskey's been sitting in these burnt barrels for the last 30 years or whatever the hell it is, and it's in these buildings that are 150 years old. And I mean, there's a whole story, and you can go see the story. You can tour it and see it from start to finish, all the way up into including getting your own, straight out of the barrel Jack Daniels while you're there, and they revere it much more than just, when I get drunk, I drink, like I said, I drink Grey Goose. I don't know where the fuck it comes from, Iceland or something. I don't know.
And you don't care.
And I don't care, right?
Don't care.
I just know I like it. But Belvedere's my favorite. I don't know, it might be Russian or something. Belvedere. I don't have any. I have no good goddamn clue, right? But there's no story. But if there were a story behind it, I probably would go to that brand because I like the lady foraging through the forest for whatever it is that makes whatever the spirit is I'm drinking.
Somehow these people find me because there's also a skincare shop on Alberta that's doing something very similar, foraging her own herbs to make skincare. And it's an actual shop on Alberta. And we're celebrating their 5-year anniversary next month. And
5 years in business.
I think 5 years, either 5 years at that location or 5 years total. I'm not quite sure.
Impressive to have a business that long.
Like an actual brick and mortar,
that's saying something, particularly in today's day and age. So, Sammy, I could go on all night.
Yeah, I know.
This is very your story's fantastic, and it speaks exactly, or it's the exact example of what we try to talk about here on this podcast, which is that you don't need to have that sterling background or that Harvard education or any of the rest of that to make a success of yourself. Success defined by what it is that's important to you. It's not always success. I always say you want to be successful in marriage. Find somebody that's happy and been married for 25 years and ask them how they did it. You want to be successful in business? Find that. You want to be successful, whatever it is your thing is, find that person that has been successful at it and chase it from that perspective. And you don't need the credentials in order to find that.
I think also something to take away is allowing yourself to be vulnerable and asking for support.
Yes.
Is really important.
Right.
And not having that pride. Of not, reaching out to your peers or someone who is more skilled than you or someone who has been there and around the corner, because that's how you grow. Yeah,
I agree. How do people get a hold of you?
You can go to lambdalion.com.
Okay.
I'm also on Instagram at Queen Lambda.
Where does Lambda come from? Because that made me think of what was the nerd movie? Lambda, I think was the name of the...
I think it's the Goonies, isn't it?
No, it was the Nerds.
Right. Lambda,
Revenge of the Nerds was Lambda. So that's what I thought when I saw that.
So Lambda means wavelength.
Oh, okay.
And when we first started, so we were both heavily into entertainment and music, and frequency is all around us. I mean, energy, we are energy, and energy is everything. And a lambda is basically like the wavelengths you see that, kind of fluctuate just like we do, just like life does, just like situations and circumstances and so forth do. And that's kind of, I don't know, we just He's an engineer.
Okay.
And Lambda was just prevalent in his studies and that kind of thing. And Lion, we just both connected with the strength,
Yeah.
and the perseverance and the creativity of a lion.
I love it because
Yeah.
it's a name that maybe doesn't necessarily explain exactly what you do, but you'll have
Right.
it'll mean
Yeah.
what you define it as.
Yeah, it's definitely a backstory, but it's essentially a group, and then we create different concepts underneath that
Wow.
and manage that.
All
Very
right.
cool.
So I'm sorry. Say it again. How to get a hold of you on Instagram?
At Queen Lambda.
At Queen Lambda.
Yeah, so LAMBDA. Yep. And then from there, you can just click on that bio link, and there's the rest of where you can find me.
Fascinating story.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That wraps us up, people. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Be sure to check us. One of these days, I'm 120 of these things.
Almost 130
Can't
episodes
do it
later.
without reading it.
And you
I
still have
fucked
to
my
read it.
brain up. I swear to God. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, Google, Reddit, Jerry Brazie on all of them. Send us your questions to questions@jerrybrazie.com. Remember, people, as you just heard from Sammy's story, opportunities are everywhere, but you got to go get them. Peace.
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 Peace.